Today, we're exploring a significant development in UK football governance that could have ripple effects across the gambling industry. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy announced David Cogan, OBE, as the government's preferred candidate to lead the newly established independent football regulator. While the regulator's primary focus is football governance, its establishment signals a broader governmental intent to tighten oversight in sports. This could potentially mean a shift in the attitude towards gambling sponsorships. I'm Viktor Kayed, senior journalist at SBC News, and I'm joined by Ted Orme-Claye, editor of SBC News, and Ted Menmuir, SBC's editor-at-large. But before that, thanks to Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution in the iGaming market, for continuously supporting the iGaming Daily podcast. Hello, gents. Welcome to today's episode. How are you, Ted OC?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, good to be back in the podcast studio with you. Had a decent, quite a good sporting weekend, haven't we, to be fair? Not for my club, Forest, actually. We got knocked out of the FA Cup, as we were talking about earlier. But, yeah, two pretty exciting FA Cup games, pretty exciting boxing fight on a Saturday night as well. Yeah, and now we're going to have a chat more about football, I guess.
Yeah, Ted M., did you enjoy the sporting weekend?
Yeah, very much so. Good fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed not interacting with marathon runners in London. So, yeah.
Your team Arsenal chasing European glory as well, aren't they, Ted? You know?
Oh, yes,
what do you reckon?
yes,
You excited? You reckon it's going to happen?
So let's talk football, but let's talk on the topic, guys. I'm going to reel you back in. We have a lot to discuss today, so I'm going to start with you, Ted OC. Can you tell us a bit what are the primary responsibilities of the independent football regulator, or the IFR?
So this is something that the government has wanted to set up for quite some time. The prospect of it started under the Conservative government a couple of years ago, mainly in the aftermath of the attempted European Super League breakaway league and the public backlash against that, very extensive fan backlash from a lot of clubs as well, especially the lower league ones. And that led to the fan-led review of football, which recommended a more hands-on government approach to regulating the sport. The football governance bill was originally proposed by the Conservatives. It was shelved during last year's election and then resurrected by Labour. And it now looks like it's pretty much set to be approved. I think it's having its second reading today, isn't it?
28th of April, yep.
Yeah. And last week, as you said, David Cogan was announced as the government's preferred candidate to become the chief of this regulator as and when it gets created, pending parliamentary approval. The independent football regulator, as you've alluded to, its main job is going to be overseeing and regulating the finances of football and the governance of football. It's less to do, I think, with like the legal side and the marketing side of things that more directly impacts gambling. But there could be some knock-on effects, some sort of domino effects, I think, and more about how it impacts the wider conversation. So the main thing it's going to be concerned with is, firstly, like I say, governing the sport. They want to clamp down on what Lisa Nandy and other politicians have called like rogue ownership. The idea that you've got owners coming in who just sort of want to exploit football clubs for their financial prospects, make money off fans without giving anything back. These sort of ideas behind it, and potentially running clubs into the ground with poor financial decisions. We've seen that happen on a couple of occasions in recent years, with clubs going into administration. Quite a good example from around the Greater Manchester area of that. Well, maybe not a good example, but a bad example of management would have been the saga around Bury FC, which obviously was went into administration. And I think actually there's now like a Phoenix club, isn't there, for Bury? So the main focus is on that. It's also on preventing breakaway leagues and generally about ensuring that clubs have solid, sustainable finances. I think this last element of it is going to be what becomes significant for the gambling sector, because obviously part of ensuring sustainable finances for clubs is having good commercial partnerships, and betting partnerships are highly valuable to a lot of clubs. So I think this is where the conversations around the IFR will kind of cross over in like a Venn diagram sort of sense with the conversations around betting sponsorship and marketing and betting's relationship with the sport.
Right, and we're going to delve into that more soon. Ted M., do you have an opinion of Kogan? Do you think he is well positioned to lead the IFR effectively?
His PR seems great. And again, I mean, look, going from Ted's introduction, I'm very much in kind of the skeptics camp as into what is this role and what kind of clear impact it will have on football, and whether this is not just politics kind of intervening or being reactive to the topic or the discussion of football. Again, as Ted said, this was very much a reaction to the breakaway league by kind of European giants that I think this was going back to, 2019?
A little later than that, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, this whole conversation goes back quite a while, doesn't it? About, like we said, financial governance of clubs and relationships with fans. That's a conversation that goes back years, but I think this itself is like, 2021? Was that when the European Super League was?
Yes, yeah, I remember that. It was like during the I think the first COVID summer.
Yeah.
And look, they found their man in David Kogan. He's got kind of the right pedigree, so he's a media rights expert. He's negotiated. But again, what is the remit of negotiation in football governance, right? The Premier League negotiates its own kind of media rights package. It has that relationship with the broadcasters. If this is about really the governance of football, it's about the standards, the fans' rights, and kind of the consumer redress, if we have any in football. And I think this is what the football governor has to establish. We'll find out if he's the right man.
Mm-hmm. And do you guys believe that that there is a possibility for the IFR to go after gambling sponsorships in football? Ted OC?
I'd say no. It's certainly not from where we currently see the legislation going. I think we've spoke about this on a podcast before, haven't we? About there was an attempt during the Lords debate around this legislation by a Liberal Democrat peer. I can't remember his name now off the top of my head.
Addin or
Addington, was that it? Yeah. Thank you, Victor. Yeah. He proposed some amendments that would have looked at curbing sponsorship in football. There was ones like a requirement for clubs to minimize or completely get rid of sponsorship, like visibility of gambling in the sport over time. Some other sort of restrictions around that, really attempting to go beyond the Premier League's voluntary ban on sponsorship that will come into effect next year. But these weren't adopted by the rest of the Lords. I think one Lord in particular, I think, said something along the lines of, "I understand where you're coming from with this, but this isn't the means to do it." It was kind of seen like they need to keep these two things separate. The Gambling Act review and the general sort of scrutiny of betting sponsorship and the football governance bill, there's a desire among politicians and legislators to keep those two very separate, I think, for now. However, as I said earlier, one of the main remits of this regulator is going to be to look at the financial governance of clubs, the financial sustainability of clubs, and commercial partnerships are quite central to that. So I do think further down the line there will be an increasing crossover regarding the conversation and the different regulatory remits. But that will all come in time. I don't think that will be front and centre for this regulator.
I'd just add to that there's already been an intervention in football and gambling sponsorships, and that from the 2026 to 2027 season is when the front end sponsorships will be cancelled.
True.
But again, the focus here should be on the governance and going back to the football clubs themselves. And we keep on the mistakes that we keep on seeing is not necessarily on the football sponsorships, but it's on who the clubs are partying up with. And I think that is where an area where governance needs to be applied.
But guys, regardless of who the sponsor is, we've seen an increasing public outcry about the prevalence in gambling's role in football and all the advertisements that fans are obviously, not all of them, but a large number of fans are obviously not happy with them. And since the fan engagement will be a core principle of the IFR, how can these ongoing public concerns influence the IFR stance on such deals, do you think, TLOC?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You're right that there has been a lot of public backlash against a lot of deals, a lot of new deals signed. you are right about that. You can go on every time a new deal gets announced. You can go on Twitter and find fan groups that are where people are saying, "Oh, great, another gambling deal, another bookmaker partnership. This is exactly what we need." I think there's a lot of sentiment like that. However, I think we should also go back to Ted's point here. I think a lot of this relates to specifically what companies clubs are partnering with. We've never really seen much of a extensive fan or public criticism against West Ham's deal with Betway, for example, because Betway is quite a well-known, well-regulated and licensed operator. The ones that people get annoyed about and are show most frustration with and often a lot of confusion with are, as we've talked about before, a lot of the deals between Premier League clubs and offshore
Asian-facing.
Particularly the Asian-facing brands, often ones that are involved in cryptocurrency as well, which just adds another layer of complexity and public concern. I think that there does need to be a dividing line there. Although, of course, there are still some people, there are a lot of fans who would just like to see all betting partnerships removed. But the ones that are causing the most frustration and the worst PR for the industry are these offshore ones, the Asia-facing ones. Yeah, Ted, I can see you want to jump in here, so go on, mate, go on.
Because this really gets to me because, they use kind of this politicized language to say that we want kind of more fan engagement. And you see a fan engagement saying we don't like this sponsor. So where is the intervention from DCMS or the UKGC to say, all right, we've reviewed this partnership and we don't like it. And we don't think it should be applied to the Premier League or any football division. And it's such an easy intervention, and you don't need to go through this process of we've hired an independent regulator to review each deal, right? And if you want kind of financial fair play and consumer redress, that's where it starts.
But on the other hand, we have the clubs, especially in lower leagues, the vital, a key amount of their finances come from such sponsorships, and a lot of them have been advocating for light touch regulations, and they might be against these regulators coming out and telling them, hey, you shouldn't do this. They like to keep sort of autonomy over their financial structure. So I'm not sure. Maybe when we have the fans on one side that are against such sponsorships that are, again, quite lucrative for some clubs, and on the other side, we have the clubs who want to retain them. Do you guys think that there's potential tensions between clubs and fans that the IFR will need to resolve?
I feel like sort of yes and no here, Victor, because I do think, yes, there will be continued tension between clubs and fans. Like I say, you can see that on social media every time one of these Asia-facing partnerships gets announced. However, I don't think the IFR will be the regulator to deal with this. It doesn't have gambling or marketing. It doesn't have any real remit yet. Yes, as it currently stands, it doesn't have any remit over that. We've seen the amendments in Parliament get shut down. Maybe further down the line, this could be something it will have to take more of a role in, especially given, as you said, its creation is a result of the fan-led review of football. The whole idea, but one of the whole ideas behind it is to give fans more representation, to sort of oversee more fan representation in how football clubs are governed. So further down the line, yes, we could speculate that this is something that this is a conversation that will happen. But for now, I don't think that will be the case. I don't think there's any sign that will be the case yet.
All right, we're going to go into a break, very quick one, and we're going to come back discussing this topic very soon. Welcome back to this episode. So we were just talking about the potential tensions that could rise between fans and clubs because of gambling sponsorships. Ted M, could we find a middle ground to ease these tensions with a standardized version of the PL's front of shirt gambling ban across the rest of the leagues mandated by the newly established IFR?
Well, I mean, it's a situation we don't know what the outcome is because this is going to come into play in 2026, right? And we'll see who behaves and who's breaking the rules, right? Now, I don't think that this is a policy that's just going to carry out throughout the leagues. There are going to be clubs who, break the rules, and it's up to the governance of football to step in and say, look, we're not going to tolerate that, or we're not going to tolerate these partnerships or the visibility. There are already kind of safeguards in English football. They are working to a better kind of code of conduct across the Premier League and EFL that was signed in last year. So they've got a lot more sensitivity here about the exposure of gambling in the terraces, kind of at match day events. It's really a case of wait and see, but it's also a case of we have to actually kind of find out what is the kind of priority of the football regulator and also kind of Labour's vision of overall football in the UK.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm gonna go back to you, Ted. In terms of the relationship between the UKGC and the IFR, we're talking about purely relating to gambling sponsorships here. How do you see this relationship developing over time? Because it's gonna definitely be an interesting one to witness.
I'll look from a journalist point of view. I'll be monitoring kind of the early movements to see, how engaged, and it's not just the UK Gambling Commission, but DCMS and kind of all kind of relevant stakeholders are with this football governor, including kind of, the financial institutions of the UK who actually monitor football as a business. Now, the other thing that comes into play is that the structure of English football is completely different to what you get in Europe, especially the main leagues, be it Germany and Spain. So again, look, there are multiple reasons, so many more reasons in the UK why a football club can go out of business compared to other European leagues. So what are kind of the safeguards that it's going to implement? That's going to be kind of a key decision coming in.
Mm-hmm. And Ted Ossie?
Regarding the relationship between the two, I think this is something that will start off maybe not minimal is the right word. You know what I mean? But it's like
are they going to go for a dance along?
Yeah.
Are they there on like Tinder, like hinging? No, I genuinely, I wish it were like that.
They'll be in each other's DMs to start with, mate. That'll be how it will work. That is, mate, we say that as a joke, but that will be initially how these two work together. Will just be liaising, making sure that each other are updated on whatever the relevant issues are. You know what I mean? There'll just be exchanging of contacts and things like that. It'll just be as the different regulatory issues develop further, as we see, like I said earlier, this sort of Venn diagram of different remits and responsibilities that cross over, chiefly being the IFR's remit to ensure financial responsibility and financial sustainability for football clubs, part of that being commercial deals, and the Gambling Commission, its responsibility to oversee the implementation of this code of conduct around sponsorship deals, its own role in overseeing, or independently overseeing, I guess, the Premier League's voluntary ban on sponsorship. That in time will probably develop. But obviously, this is all speculation at this point, and like Ted said, it's sort of our role as journalists to keep an eye on how this develops and what each regulator's move in their respective areas are.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up here. As always, thank you, James, for your in-depth analysis. For all you listeners out there, you can subscribe to the iGaming Daily podcast for more breakdowns of the latest developments in gambling. Thanks for listening, and until next time.